The winner will replace Rishi Sunak as leader of the opposition. Has anybody seen Rishi Sunak at all? He seems to have vanished. Anyway, they're going to replace Rishi Sunak, of course, led the party, the Tories, to a crushing election defeat, losing almost 2/3 of his MPs. The Conservatives don't disclose how many members of the party have voted, but you had to be a party member for, I think, 90 days, at least 90 days, to get a vote. And I think in 2022, something like 172,000 people decided the fate of the country. Dan Hodges is political commentator at the Mail on Sunday. Good morning to you, Dan.
Good morning.
Does it matter who wins this election?
Yes, it does. It's very important, whatever the government does, that we have an effective opposition. We certainly need that, given some of the mistakes the government's been making.
I'm sorry, I meant more in the terms of you can have one right-winger with a checkered past in government or another right-winger with a checkered past in government. It's not much of a choice.
Yeah, no, I think there is a difference between Kemi Badenoch and Robert Jenrick. I mean, Kemi Badenoch has some strong views, some strong right-wing views. I think we've seen in the election campaign, it's not entirely clear what Robert Jenrick actually believes in. I mean, he's been coming out with a series of sort of quite contradictory policy positions in a bid to appeal to Tory members,
telling people what they want to hear.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, in fairness to her, on occasions, Kemi Badenoch has demonstrated she's prepared to tell her party some things that they don't necessarily want to hear. So I think that's what I would see as the distinction between the two. But obviously, it may well be that Robert Jenrick's strategy of appealing pretty shamelessly to the Tory base may have worked for him. We'll obviously have to see in a couple of hours.
I suppose, arguably, the most interesting question is which one would Keir Starmer most like to not win? Who is he most afraid of out of those two?
Well, I don't think, to be perfectly honest, either of them are keeping Keir Starmer up much at night. But if you put a gun to his head, he would probably prefer to run against Robert Jenrick. I mean, Robert Jenrick has made very clear he is going to move the Tory, lurch the Tory party out to the right, to the political margins, to try and counter the threat from reform. And Keir Starmer's analysis, and the people around Keir Starmer's analysis, is that will create a huge amount of space in the political centre that they would be able to exploit. Kemi Badenoch, on the other hand, she's a bit of a wild card. She's a bit unpredictable. If you speak to any of her colleagues, they quite like her, but they think, as somebody said to me, she'd cross the road to pick a fight with her own reflection on occasion. And so she's seen as a much more volatile political option from Labour's perspective, and that brings a degree of uncertainty. And they would prefer the uncertainty of Robert Jenrick, who, as I say, would lurch the Tory party to the right, and in Labour's view, create a lot of political space.
It's interesting. You and I have a very similar perspective on this, albeit coming from a very different base. The centre issue, you see, I'm still naive and think the centre is where elections are won. Is there a danger that the methodology the Tory party uses to choose leaders, with its inherent bias through the party membership towards sort of older, wealthier white men, that pattern means that the party's going to constantly choose people that reflect well on that sector and doesn't do anything in terms of engaging with, younger voters, making the party a more appealing and giving it a broader base? Isn't there a risk that in just worrying about reform and going to the right and with this selection process, that the Conservative Party is going to be out of power for decades?
Yeah, I mean, that is very much the danger. I mean, I've got to say that is the danger you've identified, though, is a danger for all political parties.
Agreed.
I mean, if you remember, it's not that long ago, the Labour Party members elected Jeremy Corbyn as their leader. And if you also remember, Keir Starmer won the Labour leadership election by pledging broadly to follow Jeremy Corbyn's broader policy agenda. Remember, he came out with his 10 what were virtually Corbynite pledges that he said would guide him. Obviously, as soon as he won power, he then took those pledges, ripped them up, and threw them away. And I think that is going to be the question for whichever of the candidates wins this morning. if they do follow this, obviously we've had months of them speaking to the Tory membership. If they continue after their election to speak and pitch themselves to the Tory membership rather than pitch themselves to the British people, then they will be heading for even more electoral disaster. So that is the key for whoever wins. Will they be able to pivot round and start speaking to the country rather than speaking to their own party?
Do you think they will look at how leaderships are chosen in 1922 and going to the members? Do you think that is up for discussion down the line?
Well, I think there's two things. I mean, I think certainly they may need to review the situation where the 1922 committee, if they get, I'm not sure what the figure is, but it's so low now with such a small number of Tory MPs. So if you get 30 letters, then you have a leadership challenge. I mean, that makes it very, very difficult for a leader to take the party in a new direction. So on that scale of things, that area of things, I think whoever wins may look at it. But I think at the moment, it's very hard to turn around and say to the Tory party members, you're not going to have a say in how your leader's elected anymore. I mean, I personally think that politically that would be a positive thing to do, but I'm not entirely sure either of the candidates that we've got in front of us at the moment have got the political courage to do that.
What a fascinating conversation, Dan. Really, thank you. Dan Hodges there, political commentator at the Mail on Sunday, with a very objective appraisal, I think, of where the Tory leadership race is going.